accessibility dashboard. I believe heading up that conversation is Dr. Tiznado-Aitken, or who we all know affectionately as Nacho. Dr. Tiznado-Aitken is the research coordinator of Mobilizing Justice. We are very lucky to have him in that role. And today he's going to be talking about a really exciting tool that's going to help make transportation data that can be used for equity more accessible to all. And so with that, I will pass the floor over to you, Nacho. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Very nice presentation. So yeah, I'm very happy to see so many people connected today. It's really great. For those who don't know me, I'm Ignacio. As Matt said, I'm the research coordinator of the Mobilizing Justice project. And today I will be leading the session about the accessibility dashboard. But before jumping into the presentation and the demo that we have prepared for this session, I want to begin by giving some space to John Salter, the Director of Education and Research at Esri Canada, and also Yannick Clement-Godbout, Manager of Infrastructure Data at Infrastructure Canada, for some opening remarks. So, John, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks, Ignacio. I'm John Salter. I direct the Education and Research Group with Esri Canada. Our group supports the use of Esri software in education from K-12 through higher education, and a large component of the work that we do is partnering on academic research projects that address key company priorities. And one of our top priorities at Esri Canada is the transportation sector. And as I think you've seen in a lot of the work here today, there's some excellent research going on in Mobilizing Justice, addressing transportation equity, which is a huge issue for a lot of our municipal partners. We have a large and growing transportation department at Esri Canada, and one of the things that we do is we host a quarterly Canadian transportation infrastructure meeting with partners from municipalities, transportation agencies, provincial and federal ministries, and industry partners, with the goal of that meeting being to share transportation solutions. And just note that Stephen is going to be presenting this accessibility dashboard on November 30th at the next iteration of that meeting. So we've been enthusiastic supporters of Mobilizing Justice since the project's inception, but it was with the accessibility dashboard that we really had the great opportunity to work with the Mobilizing Justice researchers, applying some of our tools and some of our staff's expertise to this. So it's been a really fun, productive, sometimes intensive 6 months of collaboration with the investigators, students, staff of Mobilizing Justice. I'd like to extend thanks to Statistics Canada and Infrastructure Canada for developing a really incredible data resource which underpins the dashboard that Ignacio is going to be presenting to you today. And I'd also just like to acknowledge from our education and research group, Ben Woodward, who's a co-op student from Waterloo University and who was the primary developer of the dashboard over the summer months when he was working with us. He's done some really excellent work. And Alex Smith, who's a full-time staff member with us. He's been working with Jasmine and Jamie, other researchers from MJ, to develop a hub which is going to house the dashboard and other resources for the Mobilizing Justice project. So we're really looking forward to any feedback from you today, anything that we can do to improve those resources, working with the MJ team. And I'd just like to say thanks everyone for being here. I'll hand it back over to you, Ignacio.
Thank you so much, John. Yannick?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Yannick Clement-Godbout. I'm manager of data and analytics at Infrastructure Canada. So our role is to basically, do research, collects data, and then develop data and do analytics to support, the policy programs, developments within INFC, but also make sure that data is publicly available so that other researchers and experts in there could use this data to develop good infrastructure projects. One of the things we tried to do is address data gaps. And so 2 years ago, when we connected with Stephen and the Mobilizing Justice team, it became apparent that there was a gap that maybe could be filled with some of the work that could be done with Mobilizing Justice and StatsCan. And we've been super happy of the results of this project. It's produced a really good data set that's narrowly available geographically across Canada. It's also standardized across Canada. So for us, this is something that's important, that allows for comparison across regions. And would really like to thank the Mobilizing Justice teams that have been good resources and provide like lots of peer review throughout the development of this. And when it comes to that specific measures that we've developed with StatsCan, we're in the process of doing updates to it. So we'll be adding more modes of transportation, different measures as well when it comes to amenities, and then potentially we're trying to push StatsCan to make the backend data publicly available too. So that's it. Is that good, Steven and Ignacio? Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so
Great.
much.
And that's a nice surprise for us at the end there. So I was just talking about getting that back end data. So that would be great.
We're pushing for that.
Okay, we'll talk more. Thanks, Yannick.
Okay, so after this opening remarks from John and Yannick, I will jump directly into the presentation. I will be doing a brief introduction of our new accessibility dashboard, a platform for equity, transportation equity and accessibility analysis. So let me check. Yeah, so I want to begin by acknowledging this great team and partnership that we created since March. First of all, Esri Canada, you already heard John's opening remarks. He was the leader of a team composed by Alex and Ben as well. From the MJ side, we have two faculties, Chris and Antonio, and one PhD student, Joao, who have been like actively working on this initiative under the Activity 2 working group of our partnership that focuses on data-driven equity standards. And finally, Jamie, Jasmine, Steve, and I, all of us composing the central team of the Mobilizing Justice project. This is a whole team working on this dashboard. So this is a high-level overview of our timeline. The project, as I said, started in March, and we decided to have bi-weekly meetings to keep making progress. At the end of May, we have our first prototype, just with the essentials in terms of functionalities and design. And with that prototype, from June to August, we went through several sessions for consultation with other partners, with potential users who provided very valuable feedback for the final version. We did a sneak preview of this tool in September just to ensure that everything was working as expected. And today we are doing the official launch of the dashboard. One thing that is important to highlight in this timeline is this is particularly focused on the dashboard development, but this interactive tool is part of a broader initiative that John already mentioned that is called the Mobilizing Justice Hub. And the Mobilizing Justice Hub is an online space that tries to bring together valuable resources for a variety of different users. We aim to have a space where you can find interactive tools, conceptual explainers, different kind of analysis, open data, and other resources. So far, we have 3 available resources in the hub, an interactive map of community initiatives addressing transportation poverty in Canada. We have the accessibility dashboard as well, and conceptual explainers that allow potential users of the dashboard just to understand the concepts, the measures, and the dashboard itself. And in this session, particularly, I will be focusing on the dashboard and the associated explainers. So you might be wondering what's like the main purpose of the dashboard, and in our goal to basically foster transportation equity in Canada, we created this online dashboard to serve as a tool for community action on transport poverty. We leverage spatial accessibility measures and apply an equity lens using census data to empower communities, researchers, urban planners, and decision makers to explore, to analyze, to advocate for transportation systems that are fair, inclusive, and accessible to all. So the dashboard has 3 main components. The first one is something that Yannick already mentioned also in his opening remarks, the spatial access measures. That is a national data set developed by Statistics Canada and Infrastructure Canada that includes accessibility scores to different facilities. We have educational facilities, healthcare facilities, employment, grocery stores, cultural and health facilities, sports and recreational facilities. The scores cover all regions, cities, towns, and rural areas in Canada and reflect how reachable are different destinations from different origins in a region or in a municipality using 3 different transportation modes. We have public transport, both in peak and off-peak hours, and we have cycling and walking as well. These measures from the spatial access measures are combined with our second component, that is basically the social and economic equity data from the census. So this way, the dashboard users are able to see how accessibility varies from location to location, but also across 17 different population groups characterized by multiple indicators of social disadvantage, empowering them to explore, analyze, and advocate for fair transportation and transport justice in their communities. And finally, when dashboard users click on a certain area within the map view, you will see that in the demo after, several interactive tools activate, providing charts and more information about how accessibility compares to other areas and how accessibility for the selected population group compares to accessibility for the general population. As I mentioned before, this dashboard is included in the Mobilizing Justice Hub that also have some conceptual explainers that allows potential users, dashboard users, to understand the concepts behind populations at risk of transport poverty, the measures and the methodology used for the dashboard, and also a glossary of key terms. So we envision several different users, potential users for this platform. Without going into all the details, we see value for residents to learn more about accessibility and compare their experience with others, activists by empowering communities and support advocacy efforts, planners and decision makers who want to identify problems or have evidence for policy agendas or create reports, and also super users or researchers interested in data, documentation, and methodology. So after this very brief summary, I want to show you a short video that Ben from Esri Canada prepared, showing the main features of the dashboard and how to navigate. So give me 1 second.
Hello and welcome to this demonstration of Mobilizing Justice's Transportation Equity Dashboard. This dashboard was designed to bring Statistics Canada's spatial access measures dataset to life. This fantastic Canada-wide dataset provides information on how easy it is to access certain services, shown here in step 2, such as healthcare, education, recreation, employment, grocery stores, and more, by different modes of transportation, including walking, cycling, and public transit at both peak and off-peak times. The dashboard also brings in fine dissemination area level demographic information so that this can be compared to the spatial access measures, allowing us to move beyond answering questions about service level and towards answering questions about transportation equity. So for our demonstration today, we're going to start in Montreal, and we've set up a fairly simple scenario about walking to school. And as you can see, with very little surprises, the densest areas of Montreal have the best ability for people to walk to school, simply because there's a higher concentration of schools in those areas. And if we go to a different area, for example, Toronto, you can see a very similar trend where the densest areas of Toronto, the highest concentrations of schools, it's easiest to walk to one or more different schools. And as we go out into the GTA, and perhaps even further afield, we can see that these values decrease. And while it's useful and all to compare these values between cities, it's also interesting to look within a particular city or area and see which parts of that community have the highest and the lowest spatial access values. In this case here, 0 on the map represents the lowest, and 1 represents the highest, as you can see in the legend. If we zoom into Guelph, though, we can adjust these values using step 3, which allows you to adjust the national scores to different units of census geography, including census metropolitan areas, census divisions, or what we'll select today, census subdivisions. And you can see right away, it's a lot easier to observe what areas of Guelph have the easiest access to schools by walking. No surprise, around the densest sort of downtown areas of Guelph, you have the best access. But this applies not just for walking to school. We can change our destination to jobs, employment, and we can change our mode to public transit peak to look at commuting to jobs at peak times. And we see a similar pattern observed in Guelph, where that downtown area, likely with the most jobs, has the highest values. We can go over to Kitchener-Waterloo quickly and see, a somewhat similar pattern, but we see the major transportation corridor, in this case, the Ion Light Rail System, is highlighted. But this is truly a Canada-wide tool. So let's head over to Calgary and see what's going on there. And as you can see, very similar idea with the downtown and many different key transportation corridors highlighted. But if we zoom out, we see that some of our census subdivisions are shown in gray. And if we look in the legend, it says no access to selected mode or destination. And that simply means that that census subdivision either doesn't have the destination we're looking at. So I found that some don't have healthcare facilities nearby, but most have employment. So likely the culprit here is that these census subdivisions don't have sort of large public transportation networks. And if we switch to walking quickly, we can see that the data populates for these census subdivisions. Now, the other useful thing you can do with this dashboard, again, is bring in that demographic information and start to answer those questions about transportation equity. And the dashboard allows you to do this in a variety of ways. So to do this, we'll go over to Halifax. And you can see that it's a census subdivision of Halifax, which is quite a bit larger than Halifax itself. And we're going to go back to our initial scenario of walking to school. We're going to zoom in on Halifax. And for a demographic, we're actually going to keep it as it is. We're going to look at population 0 to 14, so children, many of whom would be walking to school. But for different scenarios, there are plenty different demographic groups to choose from. So the first way we're going to look at our demographic information is we're going to click on a dissemination area. And you can see it takes a little bit to load in, but first off, you get this pop-up here with the dissemination area profile. It compares the access scores to those in the surrounding census subdivision, and it's also going to look at the demographic information. So we can see that 75 children live in this DA, which is 14.2% of the DA's population. But you also notice when we did that, it also populated these charts here on the right. So the top chart here is essentially a scatter plot with each dot representing a single DA in the CSD of Halifax, plotted against both their proportion of the target population group as well as their access score. And we can see from this that there is actually a slight negative correlation between access for walking to school and proportion of children. But we can see if we closely observe the R-squared value, this is a fairly small value, so more research is needed. On the bottom chart, we can see the overall distribution of access scores across the general population in gray and our demographic of interest, our children, in purple. We can also see the means highlighted here, and we can observe that the general population mean for access is actually slightly above the access level for children. You can see with the curves, they follow each other fairly closely. Another way we can bring in our demographic information is with the Highlight Priority Neighborhoods tool. If we click on that, you see this red area appear on the scatter plot. And this area highlights neighborhoods, the dissemination areas, where they have the lowest access score and the highest proportion of our demographic of interest. So if we click on one of these neighborhoods on the chart, you can see that they're all actually highlighted on the map. And we can read in our profile that the access score is below that for the CSD average, and also that a high proportion of people living in this DA are children. Another way we can bring in demographic information to our dashboard is using the population points layer. If we toggle this on, we can see that we get a dot density layer showing the distribution of people of our target population group. In this case, children 0 to 14. So that was a demonstration of the transportation equity dashboard. Thank you for watching, and we hope you find it useful.
All right. So after that demo, I just want to come back to the presentation. Just to let you know that we are conscious that this is a first version of the dashboard and therefore can be improved over time. Some interesting key directions that we have heard in the different sessions and feedback is to incorporate intersectionality, for example, how different aspects of our identities intersect, such as ethnicity, class, or gender, and create interconnected forms of discrimination or disadvantage. We also plan to incorporate driving as a transportation mode for accessibility analysis in the future and add more destinations when available at the national scale. So now I want to have a space for any questions or comments you may have. I know that a lot of the team members, probably all of them are here today, so we should be able to answer most of your questions and comments. I'm just reading a lot of comments in the chat. You can, of course, raise your
Sorry, I
hand.
do have a question. I just don't know how to raise my hand. So, okay, so quick question though is, will so this is what the dashboard is going to look like. Is there going to be different iteration of the tool to maybe include other types of data in there? I think some of the, like, thinking of, for example, leveraging the load. And when you select, your ability to access, let's say, I think it's grocery stores, one of the amenities. So then you can map grocery stores and you can actually see those. It's a super bad example because it's actually not on the load. But let's say healthcare facilities. So not only you have, but it will also give an idea of the type of infrastructure that exists to get to these places. And then something similar where, you could load maybe GTFS data. Because, for example, if you went quickly through it at the beginning, for people that don't know Toronto, for example, wherever you had the idea with the highest access is actually really aligned with the TTC existing lines. So for someone who doesn't know Toronto, the ability to toggle or add, a layer of existing major transit hubs or something like that would be, or could be useful. Now that's how we're using it on our site. So.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that would be a great addition, especially because not all people is familiar with all the context in Canada. But as I said, in the last slide, yeah, this is basically a first version, and we are open to incorporate.
And it looks great. It looks great. It's just some quick comments. So, thanks.
Thank you. I'm trying to get some of the questions in the chat, but if you have your hand raised, Sherwood, yes.
Sure. Again, echoing, this is super exciting work. I think integrating equity into our planning is through access measures super exciting. One of the things that we've struggled with when talking about it is how do we pick what we're measuring access to? And I'm curious if you or any other members of the team could give some commentary on how we arrived at what those key measures too are.
Well, I will jump in here. Of course, any member of the team can jump in as well. But for now, all the facilities and destinations that we are using are part of this national data set that we mentioned, the spatial access measures. So all the 7 different destinations are based on that national database. We are open to add more in the future, but of course, it's not 100% dependent on our hands. I think that if we can expand a little bit more in the future, it will be great. But I think at least now it provides a important range of different destinations, more like mandatory activities and non-mandatory activities as well. Rafael?
Oh, hi guys, just wanted to congratulate. It's really nice work. We've seen quite a few dashboards around, especially after COVID, dashboards became a thing. And regarding accessibility, there are a few accessibility dashboards popping up. This is perhaps what I would say one of the most exciting ones. We have a much simpler dashboard, as you know, for Brazil with 20 cities, and we are now working with the Brazilian Statistics Office to expand to the entire country. So it's kind of a similar effort of what you're doing. And so I wanted to ask, what are the most important challenges that you had to face in the process? And second, whether have you included accessibility like a passive accessibility in terms of how many people can reach specific places instead of active accessibility, or how many activities you can reach? Just because from a public service point of view, this could also be very interesting, but I couldn't see from the video if that kind of metric is included.
Right. I would say that probably the most appropriate person to talk about this is someone like Ben, that it was like more hands-on on the dashboard, or Steve, if you want to jump in.
Well,
The
yeah,
challenges.
I think it depends. Are we talking more about the creation of the measures or in the dashboard development?
I guess both.
Well, I can speak more to the challenges of the creation of the measures, and then Ben and John maybe about the dashboard. But for sure, the biggest issues we had were collecting the transportation data for the country. The destination data was an issue, but just by virtue of what kind of open data existed in Canada and previous work that was done by Statistics Canada to create some destination side measures, that was less of an issue by the time we tried to do these access scores. But there was a team of staff at Statistics Canada going, county by county to, just so I don't use statistics terms, but county by county across the entire nation to figure out what transit existed there, whether or not GTFS was available, whether or not it could be obtained, directly from transit authorities, whether or not they know it's missing. So, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. So really trying to categorize at a very detailed level across thousands of counties across the country. And it took a tremendous amount of effort. There's technical things. Those were solvable because we had your software, Rafa. We had R5R to do a lot of the transit analysis once we had the networks. And I would say, just pointing to the conversation in the chat, dealing with cycling accessibility was also just really challenging because of the lack of consistency from place to place on how cycling infrastructure is recorded privately or tagged in OSM data. There's just a lot of inconsistencies on how different types of infrastructure, the same infrastructure in different places, are tagged, and a lot of back and forward went into that as well. And so I'll stop there. I think that there were some interesting dashboard challenges that came up, and a lot of technical challenges on being able to display in a very fluid way a really large data set. But they really solved concerns that we had going into this around the performance of the tool. So I'll turn it over to Esri for that.
Yeah, I think Ben should speak to that. I see you're here, Ben. I'm assuming you're actually here.
Yep. Sorry for my lighting here. Yeah, I can speak to that quickly. So I think to address the passive versus active accessibility, I think the closest thing we have to passive accessibility on the dashboard is that chart on the bottom right that shows the distribution of different access levels across the population, as well as a chosen subpopulation for your selected sort of unit of census geography. So that density chart in the bottom right could give some clues for passive access within a given community. But as we've discussed earlier, we did use the spatial access measures data set as sort of the centerpiece for this dashboard. So any questions on how that was derived, the documentation is out there, and I highly encourage people to read through it, and they do a fantastic job of summarizing all the methods and assumptions used to create that data set.
And then, yeah, Ben, just to Steve's last point, maybe just speak to some of the challenges with the size of the data set and trying to get interactive performance at multiple levels of census geography as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was definitely the biggest and most interesting challenge with this project, and one that's applicable to many different projects. How do you take a massive data set with tens of thousands of dissemination areas and, you know, hundreds of columns of access scores and demographic data, and how do you, you know, show that on a web map in a way that's performant? So there was a lot of sort of back-end work that went into it. A lot of it had to do with caching the data. ArcGIS Online, if you sort of get under the hood enough, there's a lot of ability to add caching, so that once you sort of load the data set once, it'll store it in a cache rather than in the database, so that for future users it loads a lot more quickly. So that was, I think, the biggest sort of set of changes that really helped, you know, load this data set in a way that, you know, had reasonable performance to it. There are other sort of simplifications and other ways we enhanced performance as well, but, you know, the biggest one is definitely to look into to caching on ArcGIS Online. That really helped us out.
Thank you, Ben. I would like to highlight the last comment of Steve. Basically, with this dashboard, our next steps just to compute these equity measures. Our idea is to have those analyses ready to see in the hub. As I mentioned, the hub will contain not only dashboard but also all the explainers or analysis and other interactive tools. So this is just the start, and I think that many other things coming that are interesting to see in the coming months. I would like to end the presentation. Of course, we can still talking more over the chat during the break, but some of you have been asking about the access of the platform and the hub and the dashboard. And basically here are the resources. Jasmine will share the links with you in the chat. I invite you to visit hub.mobilizingjustice.ca and dashboard.mobilizingjustice.ca. You can now explore and play with the hub, with the dashboard. You will find all the explainers on how to use the dashboard, all the concepts related, the video that we showed today as well, if you want to go over that again. And yeah, that's basically all. I want to thank everyone to attend it today. And don't forget that after the break at 3 p.m., we'll have Mimi Schiller's presentation to end this second day of the Mobilizing Justice Symposium.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.